The first project is this teak table and benches. Teak, as you know, naturally ages when exposed to the sun and wind. The wood dries out and it eventually takes on this gray color. And whilst some may love this patinaed look, I will be restoring this or attempting to get this back as close as possible to the original manufacturer's finish. This is originally from Arhaus. It's their Hamptons outdoor dining in weathered fawn. As you can see, it leans into the natural color of the wood, but it does have a very slight gray tone to it. Now to throw a monkey wrench into the mix here. Before I got my hands on this, someone did work on it and my clients were not happy with the outcome at all. Not sure what was used, but it does look like a fairly opaque gray stain. Not only was it not the right color, it wasn't applied evenly. I'm getting started with the arduous task of removing the stain. I am using both my 5-inch orbital and my Festool RTS sander. Now the goal here is to remove as much of it as possible, but I will be leaving behind tiny remnants of that gray stain. You can see here it's gotten into the crevices, and if I were to sand all the way down to get to those areas, I think the table will be too smooth and lose some of the character and rustic texture of the wood. Like I mentioned, the original does have a grayish undertone, so I'm okay with a little bit of that gray since I am going to restain it. I used my 5-inch on the bigger surfaces. Of course, it was faster, but it doesn't attach to my dust extractor. Not that it can't, I just never did get the attachment for it, in part because I do need a new one. This one has seen better days. So lots of dust, and here you can see the difference with my Festool being hooked up to the extractor. There is literally no dust, not even on my hands when I was done. I also used sanding sponges from Surf Prep, so it contoured as I went along the curvy areas. This is it after I was done with the tabletop and one of the legs. You can see the big difference between the natural wood and that gray stain that was used previously. This took about 7.5 hours of sanding for both benches and the table, but I did it over a couple of days and the weather was so beautiful. It definitely wasn't as stressful as it could have been. So after many hours and lots of sandpaper, it is finally done, and look at how beautiful this natural teak wood is. I could never understand why anyone would cover up beautiful wood grain. I recently saw someone cover up hardwood with peel and stick paper. Oh my goodness, do not do that. Sand it down to its natural beauty, and with good protection, it will be a lot more durable and enjoyed for longer. Anyways, I went through with a vacuum and also wiped off any remaining dust with a damp cloth. I always say dust is the enemy of a good finish, so never skip this step. I'm going to be doing a test with 3 options. You always want to do that, especially bigger pieces like this that takes so much time to prep. Also, this is not for myself, so I want them to visually see what it's going to look like so they are happy with it before I do the entire thing. First is this Watco teak oil and stain in the color Flagstone. Then I'm going to also do a sample of the same Watco teak oil stain in the color Greystone. And finally, this Golden Care teak protector in the color Honey Brown. And here it is. I'm going to put a clip here of the Arhaus original color. Comment below which one you would choose. Option 1 is the flagstone, option 2 is the gray stone, and finally the teak protector in honey brown. It does look a little different depending on the light, so I'm going to show you from different angles. I'm also going to go ahead and apply the one we chose, but in the meantime, go ahead and comment below your choice and I'll come back and explain why we chose the one we chose, and I'll share with you the reveal and how absolutely beautiful this set turned out. Okay, so it was a toss-up between the first and the last. I think it was obvious that the gray stone was too gray. That's the one in the middle. And that last one, the honey brown, although on camera does look very much like the original, I felt it would be too yellow when the entire thing is done. So I did recommend the flagstone. I felt it had that very slight gray undertone, yet it enhanced the natural color of the wood. I applied it using a roller and a brush and wiped it back with a shop cloth. For this next outdoor furniture flip, we are completely switching gears and going from wood to metal. With the extreme heat and rain here in South Florida, outdoor furniture can really take a beating. The coating on these were peeling and bubbling everywhere, and like any other furniture flip, preparation is key. I'm getting started by removing as much as I possibly can of that peeling paint. I'm not going to strip it all off. My goal is to get all the surfaces as even as possible before refinishing. I'm using my sander, and since this is a much harder surface, I'm using an aggressive 40 grit on these particular areas. Once I had it all cleaned up, the next step was taping off the seats and priming, neither of which I filmed because, to be honest, I didn't really intend on making videos of these projects. A lot of the commission work I don't make it here on the channel. Some of it I think is just kind of mundane and boring in my opinion. I record bits of it just to have it, but for these two I reconsidered because it occurred to me that you may also be preparing for the warm weather ahead, and I figured these projects may be useful. So with that said, we're bumping this to the finishing stage. I am using Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover in a satin finish and in the color Espresso. Although this is a primer and paint in one, I did prime with this here. Also, these were a lot of chairs. They were huge and really heavy. I did them 2 at a time with a day between each stage. I sanded and cleaned, then the next day I primed, then the next day sanded again, cleaned it up and did the first coat, and then the following day lightly sanded again, cleaned it up, up and give it a final coat. So you can imagine this project was stretched out over a couple of weeks. Luckily for me, it was early enough in the year so the weather was beautiful and there was no rain. In fact, it rained a few days after I was already done with all of them, so it was pretty much cured and just waiting to get delivered. I used a 120 grit sanding block between coats. You always want to be on the lookout for little runs where it may have been sprayed on a bit heavier and rub those out. Another thing is to thoroughly clean it up with a damp cloth. You don't want to spray on another coat with any of that sanded paint dust on it.